Today in /malicious compliance. You want me to off? Oh, I guess the lab just wasted $4,000. So I recently started posting to Reddit, and I have a lot of stories. This one happened during my first career, when I worked as a scientist in a diagnostic lab. I had been working for about 2 years at this point, and had just been promoted to senior scientist. I had 2 supervisors in my section, each assigned to oversee half of the tests being done in our small corner of the lab, Rory and Tanya. Tanya was the senior most supervisor of the 2, and secondary to my department head, she had the most authority over me on any given day. She also hated me. Never did figure out why, but she hated about 3/4 of the people working in the lab, so I never took it personally. I just don't think she liked people. The lab tends to attract people like that, funnily enough. We always used to joke about being the rejects stuffed in a hole at the bottom of a hospital to be kept away from the general public. As for Rory, it's important to note that he had a very good reputation in the lab of never lying. He was never once caught in even a half-truth, and he'd been working there for over 30 years. He was well liked and well trusted. This will be important later. One day I was doing one of the more technically challenging tests that our department performs. It's long, fiddly, expensive, and easy to screw up. Only senior scientists are allowed to do it unsupervised. And this was maybe the second time I've done it alone. We are talking 2 days just to get it set up. It was a nightmare. While I was measuring out some gelatin powder into a beaker, I accidentally elbowed Tanya. Our workstations were right on top of each other. This happened at least 4 or 5 times a day with everyone. I apologized and go back to what I was doing, but she flips out, like full on rage, screaming in my face, kind of angry. After a couple of minutes of her tirade, she says, "Just fuck off, terrific moose. No one wants you here." And then she storms off to her office to cool off. Rory comes up to me, having seen and heard the whole thing, and asks if I'm all right. I say I'm a little shaken, but nothing too bad, and get ready to continue my work. But Rory had heard the whole thing, and he saw what test I was doing. He whispers to me, "Your supervisor told you to go. Best you do what she says, and if she causes a fuss about it, I'll be sure to tell the boss exactly what she said to you." Now, I knew Rory's reputation, so I knew I'd be safe. I also know that being told to leave early by a supervisor meant that I was still paid out for the rest of the day, provided I had worked at least 4 hours of my shift. The lab was actually pretty generous with time off, even if the pay and working conditions were shit. So I did exactly what Tanya had said. I fucked off home. Now at the stage I was at with that particular test, I had spent about $4,000 worth of reagents. Normally batches of 20 samples are run to try and keep the cost down, but it was still an expensive test when you include the nearly 3 days of work from a single scientist. This was one of Tanya's tests, and therefore Rory was not required to ensure it was done. No one in my section was very happy with Tanya, and she had gone off to her office and so couldn't see me leave, so no one went to tell her that the test was left unsupervised. Apparently, she didn't come back for over an hour, and by then the test was ruined and had to be started over again. My boss was pissed. Tanya, of course, tried to throw me under the bus, saying I had left without informing anyone and that it was all my fault. But good old trustworthy Rory told the boss exactly what Tanya had said. I love Rory, I couldn't be punished for doing exactly what my supervisor had told me to do, so I got away with it completely. Unfortunately, nothing overly terrible happened to Tanya. She got formally reprimanded and had to take an anger management course that the hospital runs, but otherwise she got no real punishment. She never yelled at me again, and was always careful to word things just right around me after that, though, so that was something. As for what I did on my half-day off, I went to the beach to enjoy the sunshine I almost never got to see working in the deep, dark dungeon that is the average hospital lab. I made sure to bring in the pictures the next day. Update. I was teaching a class with Rory today and showed him some of your replies. He's genuinely touched by it all. He does recommend not naming your children after him, though, as his name was changed for the story. Also, to all of you saying that $4,000 is too much waste for a lab in the grand scheme of things, $4,000 is nothing. Diagnostic labs will waste that daily just through simple errors. The boss was annoyed, but not disproportionately so. It's factored into the budget. This next one is entitled, You want an itemized per hour bill. Okay, pay more. So I work in a professional tax services company. Everyone in my team is assigned an amount that they charge their time per hour based upon seniority. I don't earn my per hour rate charge, and the actual cost to the firm for the work I do is probably a third to a half of my per hour rate when you factor in needing to pay for admin staff, rent, utilities, etc. for the company as a whole, as well as needing to make a profit from work. I complete a timesheet and write a comment saying whatever I'm doing now, so it's all on our system, and that today I'd spent 3 hours doing fees on this client. When we get new clients, we determine that they need to do science and then say we believe this will cost those in total. This is done so the client knows what they can expect to pay rather than saying here's our per hour rates, but it could end up being any random price billed to you upon completion. It tends to be industry standard that you don't end up billing all the time due to this quote, which in most cases you stick to so that the client doesn't get annoyed and leave. In my firm, it's normal to recover about 70-80% of the time charged to the client, but in larger firms it can be significantly less because their per hour rates are set much higher. Their overheads are split between more people. A few years ago, I had a client where we'd agreed that the work we were doing would cost to do this, I to do that at 10. When we completed it, I sent them a bill saying completed, X charged. I completed, I charged, etc. I believe it was 70% of the total time put on the client, so within our accepted recovery of the time charged. Her husband, who I'd never properly spoken to despite it being a set of work that affects both of them, sent me a rather strongly worded email saying that this invoice makes no sense and gives no indication of the time spent. I said that this was in line with what we said we'd bill that had been previously agreed. He then said that in the professional service industry, it was standard across the board to list hours spent, etc. isn't, and for it to be broken down by person as hours at I per hour, and he then changed his signature from client to client attorney at law. I googled him, and he was a practicing attorney about 10 years ago, but now lectures at a university. Fair enough. I then reiterated that this was the price we'd agreed. He rebutted again, saying that it was unprofessional, and I sent him a summary of the time spent. If I'm not mistaken, he changed his signature again to client attorney at law from size law Yale or something. I read the bill charging him 100% of the time spent, broke it down on the bill of who spent time. rather than what we did, and then sent him the internal spreadsheet showing each timesheet entry. Bill went up by 25, but he paid without complaint. Since then I've still done their bills like this and recovered 100 of time charged. This next one is entitled, When the Only Thing That Matters is the Price. One from a couple of years ago, first post on Reddit. Shooting e-commerce for a living. New customer wants prices for jewelry and sends reference images from the Tiffanyco website. Spent a couple of days with it and realized that once you're above life-size jewelry isn't pretty. Tested most available auto-retouching software, but it really wasn't good, certainly not to the reference image standard, so hand retouching was the way to go, and I gave a one-man day rate of $350. Customer says he needs per item rates, and he knows someone who will do it for $30 a piece. I was looking closer to $90 on average. I asked for examples of his work and was pointed to a generic high street site with 600 images, all auto-retouched. Sorry, what happened to Tiffanyco? And I'm already thinking we're not going to get on. So of course I was happy to match price and quality. If that's what the customer needs, I'll just put my wasted 2 days down to experience. First shoot day arrives and it's blister-packed gemstones rather than actual jewelry for a bespoke ring service. They recertified as inspected and genuine, but the certification is only valid whilst the blister pack remains intact, so I set up my station. There's no fiddly standing items, no styling, no retouching, no alternative views, no removing stands and fishing line. They read just blister packs. One front view, one closer in. Customer sidles over after an hour and says, "What's the rate for this morning?" It's not a day rate, it's $30 an item delivered, matched to the reference images you sent. Okay, and sidles away again. I shot 112 gems in 2 hours. Edit and delivery took 1 hour. 3,360. 0 for 3 hours work versus the minimum half day, 775. 0 I originally quoted. I doubt I'll meet a better customer. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, smash the bell, and whatever else our YouTube overlords require nowadays.